Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the organizers. I feel at home. I'm very excited to be here. I feel at home in many ways. I mean, what Kevin was just saying there, this first panel session is now the three of us. We know each other, we work together, we have worked together, and we're keeping on working together. I'm in a building designed by Finnish architects, I believe, and I come from Finland, so I feel at home. The weather is very much like back home, and the welcome that we received yesterday with all the speakers was really super exciting and nice. So thank you very much. Let's see. And the last thing that I'm at home at is that the museum is new. I'm talking about new media and technology, the cutting edge. We had some challenges fiddling with computers, so let's see how this works out if we get the slides running as supposed to. So I'll be talking about, I will not be doing a portfolio presentation of what Artcom does. Artcom's been around 26, 27 years, since late 80s, and I've been there now for the last 10 years. And so what we are doing, we're about 60 people, and so we're kind of split between creating sort of talking pieces, artworks in the public space, communication in space, in the museum's context, and we do lots of R&D ourselves. But it's all about interactivity, about doing new things with technology. So I wanted to narrate this idea about meaning in the making process, in the making of experiences. So now let's see if I have the tool here. Yes, it works. Okay, so this is exciting. So meaning in the making. So since our studio's work is defined by technology, technology comes with lots of expectation, and as the museum director very aptly pointed out, technology is not a measure of quality, but since technology is expensive, let's see. So these are some of the words that I feel oftentimes when potential clients or people coming to us asking for things to do. So it's all about being innovative or cutting edge, groundbreaking, high tech and modern. Now I have to put my timer on so that I don't rant for too long. It's about interactivity, digital, real-time, multi-user, network, collaborative. It's also very expensive and iconic and these kind of things. So these put lots of expectations to something that has nothing yet. It's not saying anything. This is all the kind of the waffle around it. So I wanted to narrate how we often struggle with this situation. So people coming to us who want to have all that, and then we have to stop them and say, wait a minute, what do you actually want to tell? Very common conception is also that once you add technological things, then you can put content into the system, and then there's experience that comes out. And the system, it's some sort of a black box. It's absolutely not. I mean, all aspects of this box, it's black or white or any other color, it's designed, when it is done well, as a kind of a reflexive, collaborative process with the technologists and the designers and the people responsible for the actual story all together. What I wanted to show today is starting with three cases that seem to be, on the surface, very similar thing. But if we look a little bit deeper, they turn out to be drastically different. So this is a really old project. This I think was done something like 95, something like this, at Artcom studio called Timescope. And it started as a kind of reflection of how the city is drastically changing. So it's over the last 100 years, it's gone through like 4 different reigns. And there's traces visible, but there's also many things that are disappearing. So it's a computer on a stick that you can turn around, and you look through this little viewfinder and you can see into the world. There's even a little camera module down there so that you can see through the device into the real world. So it stands in the public space, computers in the winter. There's lots of technological challenges to get it running. So you look through the device into the space, and then you see first the world as it is. You can pan left and right. This was actually a couple of years back when the Palais der Republik was being disassembled in Berlin. Then there's a toggle you can click and you can go back in time. So there's the Palais der Republik is still standing. It's further back when it was being built, and then you can even see the old the Stadtschloss, how it was in this place. And maybe we should update this thing with the unfortunate further developments of today, how the shadow of the castle is coming back. And then you can keep on panning. So this is all about historical photographs mapped in the public space so that you can really understand in the context of the space what you're looking at. So these are the different layers. But you also realize here is that, wait a minute, they're not actually photographs. So there is no one, like nobody 100 years ago went to that place, took that picture that we could then use later on. So all of these pictures are painstakingly composed of many different historical photographs to create this illusion. So it's not historical documentation, but it's communication of the experience. So now the second case, so this was the case number one. The second case, this is something that we built for the Natural History Museum in Berlin. In the main, the first hall, it's very similar to the Natural History Museum in London. So there's this big dinosaur hall. All these little symbols, M, stand for media interventions. And in this picture, so you see very nicely how prominent the technological media is. In other words, you don't really see it anywhere, which is how it's supposed to be when you have very, very powerful artifacts in space. So instead, we put these scopes, in this case Euroscopes, not time scopes, even though you also use them to travel in time, into the edge of the room, and you can look through the device. And when you look through the device, you see the space without the people walking in front of it, and you can pan it left and right. When you pan it left and right, you shift the field of view of the camera in software in order to give the best view. So we have fully controlling how people are looking at it. If you then stop and look at, for example, this raptor, suddenly it comes alive. So these video vignettes, I would like to call them, they are taking you from the museum back in time, giving you this realistic animation, but it works as a vignette starting and ending so that you come back into the same space. So all of these dinosaurs here, you wake them for a short moment, and then after that, seeing this constellation, you see it completely differently. And so you probably noticed that there were no words in this experience. So there are other places with textual descriptions and all sorts of things to give the context. This was only to focus on the experience, to kind of trigger your imagination. So we worked very hard with scientists to choose to design the right kind of vegetation in the space, lots of debates about the skin colors and so forth of these creatures. So it's scientifically as close as we can possibly have, but we don't need to highlight it with like, look at this aspect. It's about communicating the experience. Then the third, so this was the second case. So we recreated this historical animated sequences, so it's not stitching photos, but it's creating these virtual representations that have a very strong link with the artifacts in space. So the third case, this was just opened couple of weeks ago in the Morsgaard Museum in close Aarhus. Fantastic building from the Larsen architects. It's about the ethnography and history of humanity. These guys, you might have seen them in many other places. These are these extremely realistically modeled physical sculptures by the Kennis brothers. So they were also recently at the Natural History Museum, Natural History Museum in London on exhibit. So these are Neanderthals, and so different hominids over the years that in the case of our exhibition, they lead the visitors down the stairs from the foyer area into the exhibition. So we have these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hominins, where the last one is this found remains in Denmark of the modern human, and the first one, the Lucy, there on the steps. So you walk with your ancestors into the exhibition. So in this case, we designed much more elegant, indoor capable, very fine, slim viewers to look at each and every one of these reconstructions. So now we don't have any originals, we have reconstructions. So, and the challenge for us was to give similar kind of context of what these creatures would be. But since they're hominids, we are very critical looking at humans in animations especially. And we already had these extremely realistic, really emotional characters. So first the client was asking us can you please make the gyroscopes here? And we was like, no, we cannot, we don't want to, and we don't think it's fitting. So because trying to recreate the same level of nuance in hominids, in human-like figures, to try to animate them that well was not, we would absolutely fail because we are so critical as humans to looking at humans. So instead, what we did, we were inspired by this advertisement done for Philips. Maybe some of you remember this carousel. So it's a frozen moment of time. It's amazing how much you can tell in a single moment if you can move the camera freely around. So it's a little bit like going back to the dioramas, but now this diorama has a free viewpoint that you can travel around. So we wanted to use this as a principle. Archaeology anyway is a slice of time. It's a frozen moment of history. So we tried to then compose the storyline to describe the different historical facts about the Turkana boy, for example, here, what do we want to tell the visitors about these characters. So you look through this device, there's a dial on the side so you can turn back and forth. You look through this device onto the stairs, and there's the Turkana boy on the shoreline, and this is now the storyline unfolding in a still image. So he's now looking at the water, the edge of the water. You see what kind of landscape it is. Okay, he's living in sort of savanna. There's a stick on the shoulder, so it's about the use of tools, and then about what kind of food it was eating. Okay, so there was this lizard who had been, and now it's protecting. So there's all these kind of nuances that you can read in the picture, or you can just look at it as this fantastic panorama. Lighting, speculation about how humans discovered fire. It's also about the fast running of these hominids. So all of these characters have this kind of a storytelling, starting from where you are, taking you back in time, and then narrating this kind of story as a still image. But the still image, it turned out that it was not so easy to get there. So these are some glimpses of the other characters that if you go to Aarhus, you will meet them. So, so what we had done before was stitching old photographs. Then what we had done was 3D modeling. In this case, we paint. So because the models are so beautiful, the figures, we took them into a studio and green screened them and filmed them in 360 degrees and then composited the background to the real figure. So we didn't have to model the actual characters. We relied on Kenny's brothers' infinite skill in creating these sculptures. So this was the first story. So seemingly it's like, okay, get these viewers, you look into the history and that's it. Whereas for us, making them, and what do you want to tell them, whether it's creating historical scenes in the cityscape, and therefore you use hundreds of old photographs to recreate the scenery as realistically as possible, or you create completely virtual worlds, or you make this kind of a mix of film meets the digital. So, it should be obvious to this audience that computers are not necessary for meaningful interactions. So this I go really look way back in time. This is when I was a student. I did this experiment with also like archaeological finding. This is the Ute girl head that I put into this glass box, and there was a piece of mirror, and the picture on the other side explains how the rays of light gets distributed. There's a single spotlight and nothing else. But then if you look at this thing and you have this piece of mirror, you can have this really, really nice, fully three-dimensional augmented reality experience where you can look at how the facial reconstruction done by the Manchester University's medical reconstruction department combines with the CT scan of the skull of the Ute girl found in a bog in Holland some 3,000 years ago. So this is just one spotlight, and it's infinite frame rate and highly interactive. So we use this principle as another installation in the Mosgard Museum, where the rest of hominid skulls that are exhibited there, we put them on these plinths, where we would have the 3D model of the skull and the facial reconstruction to give them personality, juxtaposed with this sheet of glass in between them. So you have the skull and you have the facial reconstruction, and because of the mirror in the middle, you overlap them nicely, playing with the horizontal symmetry of human face. So you can use the mirror to do this kind of trick, to then create this so that you can kind of analyze to understand what's behind it, but you also can look your ancestor into the eyes. Okay, now I continue. I still have a few minutes. So now we continue the journey into kind of this sort of reflexive development in software, the limitations that sometimes tight budgets give us, but still, if you play them, like if you kind of split the elegance between the content development, the design, and the technology that you use, and if you can kind of juggle between them rather than do concept, commission somebody else to do exactly that thing, you can get much further. And this is what Artcom always does. So we're a mix of designers and engineers, software developers, electronics specialists, and architects and filmmakers and so forth. So we have this luxury of having an open conversation around the same table instead of passing the information to somebody else. So this is a visitor center in Iceland at the National Park of Vatnajökull Glacier. We did this one very small installation after the economic crash, so it was very tight budget, and we wanted to tell the visitors about the national parks from three perspectives. So actually, well, here you can see a little bit. So the three perspective means that there's three sides. This is about the flora, this is about the fauna, and this is about the geology of the national park. So there's this shared display in the middle, giving you the big context, and then you have these three distinctly different perspectives onto the same thing. Everybody around this space can see each other and know what they are doing. So they have this shared playground, but they also have their personal playground on this small thing in front of them. So we had tight budget. So what we ended up doing was that we used the single projector in the ceiling to serve as a projection in this sculpture, this 3D mapping sculpture of the landscape, as well as projecting the highlights for the textual layer, giving the context for those things. Now, all of you know that projecting text is straining the eyes, and pixel sizes mean that you can't really get nice text in a small scale. So what we did was that we printed the text on these handrails and mounted physical buttons on them. And the projection, which is focused on the floor, is still okay as a highlight. So this way, we could have one projector that does the interface for all these three perspectives, as well as then having the collective 3D mapping on the floor. And then the labels of these three infographic layers are always aligned so that this person has the text the right way around, this person would have the text facing them, so it's easy to read in the collective stage as well. So this was about kind of how to to really tweak the design aspects between the technological limits or the pixel, the graphic design and the experience altogether. And then the last examples that I showed, this is fresh from the press. This is, we just recently opened an extension to the zoo in Amsterdam. Zoo are normally these kind of guys. Our extension, Micropia, are these kinds of guys. So Micropia is a zoo of microorganisms. Now, since you don't see microorganisms with the naked eye, technology plays a crucial role, not as a kind of a mediator, as a screen that you look at that and look into the different world, but as the necessary way to see it in the first place. So this is part of the Micropia. It's a real biolab. These people are the caretakers of the animals. So they prepare the water bear on the slide that will be then transferred to the slide under a microscope. And this is a real badass, high-end professional microscope. But it turned out, so this was, and this is now like where our job gets very tricky. So normally you would look into a microscope through the ocular here. But if you have done that, you know that it's not so easy. It's actually quite a lot of adjustment and tweaking, and you need to be an expert to have a good view. So what we developed was this 3D viewer that you can look inside and use a normal joystick instead of the complex Carl size knobs that you can normally navigate a microscope. And then we built lots of kind of computer game-like ease of use features to a high-end technical device, because that's the way to see these things. So the technology is an absolutely integral part of the storytelling here. And here's also next to, so this is also this is doubling what you can see here. This also then has lots of other layers of information about the position in Tree of Life and so forth about these creatures. Okay, I think now I'm coming. And then another big installation, this is about the story of scale. So this is one place where you can have 2 orders of magnitude different scale things seen at the same time, which is something that in our human scale we never think about. But in the microbes to viruses, you have 5 orders of magnitude differences. So have one place where you can see 100 times bigger creature that you can still see the little guy, and you can really see it not as a pixel, but as a creature, was important for the storytelling. Okay, so I think this is now, I close my rant, I'm out of time. So maybe these are the kind of, so I don't want to have any kind of a closure, the things to take home with this, but these are some musings that I have about the technology in museums, that it's all about appropriate use of media. Media doesn't, like the political overtone should really be, like, you should really always remember that you have to play with the rules, it's expensive and it comes with political baggage, but at the same time, when telling the story, you should really keep that in the foreground. It's all about presenting media in context, so you can extend the digital into the physical space, and it shouldn't be, the experience shouldn't end at the frame of the screen. And then what the last example showed, that the interaction could, like, ideally it can be a form of communication, not a method to access a story, but it's already the story itself. Yeah. I think this is all, folks. Yes. Thank you very much.